Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Sun Moon Audiobook, the channel where we share wisdom and inspiring book journeys to help you grow and develop your best self, inside and out. The first rays of sunlight do not announce themselves with noise. They arrive quietly, scattering the shadows, reminding us that no darkness lasts forever. In those fragile moments of dawn, we remember our deepest need, to feel safe, to belong, to know that someone will keep watch as we take the next step forward. That is the ground where true leadership takes root. Simon Sinek, a thinker, storyteller, and seeker of meaning, carries a voice that is both simple and profound. His gift is to take truths that we often feel but cannot articulate, and speak them into existence in a way that makes us remember. He is not merely a writer. He is a guide who whispers, there is a better way to lead, a better way to live. His message in Leaders Eat Last is not about management strategies or corporate tricks. It is about the deep human need for safety, connection, and trust. It is about building circles of belonging in a world that often feels like a battlefield. At the heart of this book lies a single truth. When leaders choose to serve those they lead, when they sacrifice personal gain for the well-being of their people, extraordinary things happen. Trust flourishes. Creativity blooms. Courage is born. And people give their best not because they are forced, but because they want to. Think about the Marines. When a meal is served, the officers wait until every soldier has eaten before taking a plate themselves. This is not written in any rulebook, is a tradition, a living symbol of what leadership truly means. Leadership is not about rank or title. It is about choosing to put others first. It is about eating last. But how do we get there? To understand, Simon takes us deep into the chemistry of our bodies, into the way our brains are wired. He explains that leadership is not a concept. It is a biological and social reality. There are forces within us, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and cortisol that shape our behavior, our trust, and our willingness to work together. These chemicals are not abstract. They are the reason we push forward toward a goal, the reason we celebrate recognition, the reason we bond with others, and the reason stress can destroy us when left unchecked. Dopamine is that rush of pleasure we feel when we accomplish something, check a box, or win a reward. It is a chemical of progress. Serotonin is the warm glow of pride when we are recognized, when someone says, well done. Oxytocin is the deep connection of trust and love, released when we hug, when we sacrifice for each other, when we know someone has our back. And cortisol, the stress chemical, floods us when danger is near, keeping us alert but also eroding our health when it never stops flowing. Leaders, knowingly or unknowingly, shape the environment where these chemicals are released. A toxic workplace floods people with cortisol, leaving them defensive, anxious, and unable to trust. A safe, trusting environment nourishes oxytocin and serotonin, letting people feel seen, valued, and connected. This is not philosophy, it is biology, and it is why leadership matters so deeply. Simon tells the story of Captain William Swenson, a soldier in Afghanistan who ran into enemy fire multiple times to rescue his men. In the footage from a helicopter camera, Swenson is seen helping a wounded soldier into a helicopter. And then, in the middle of war, he does something small but unforgettable. He leans in and kisses the soldier on the head before turning back into danger. That kiss was not a strategy. It was not a calculated move. It was love. In its purest form, the bond between human beings when one is willing to risk everything for another. This is what leadership looks like when lived with courage. But the world we live in often tempts leaders toward another path. Endless metrics, quarterly earnings, and pressure from shareholders pull leaders to prioritize numbers over people. This obsession with short-term gains erodes trust. It replaces oxytocin with dopamine-chasing hits of success, bonuses, and targets while forgetting that people are not cogs in a machine. And when people no longer feel safe, they begin to turn on each other. The circle of safety breaks, and instead of uniting against external threats, the team becomes consumed by internal battles. Simon draws a vivid contrast. In companies where leaders eat last, people thrive. They stay late not because they have to, but because they care. They innovate, not out of fear, but out of loyalty. In companies where leaders eat first, where leaders take credit, hoard rewards, and let fear reign, people burn out, cut corners, and eventually leave. The truth is clear. Leadership is a choice. It is the daily decision to step into responsibility not for self, but for others. It is about extending the circle of safety so that everyone from the most senior executive to the newest hire knows, here you belong. Here you are safe. Here you matter. I remember once, early in my own career, I had a manager who embodied this truth. When mistakes were made, he stepped in and said, "The fault is mine." When successes came, he stepped back and said, "This is their victory." It changed me. It made me want to work harder, to give more, because I felt protected. And it is in that moment that I understood. Leadership is not about being in charge. It is about taking care of those in your charge. You, who are listening right now, may feel the weight of responsibility on your shoulders. Maybe you lead a team, a family, or even just yourself. The principle remains the same. When you put others first, when you create trust, when you build belonging, you unlock something far greater than control. You unlock commitment. You unlock love. The mantra is simple. Leaders eat last. Leaders eat last. And every time we remember this, we bring light into places where fear once lived. There's a powerful truth in the way humans have survived for millennia. We are not the strongest species, nor the fastest, but we are among the most cooperative. Our survival has always depended on tribes, on groups bound together by trust and mutual protection. Imagine the early days of humanity. Vast plains, lurking predators, uncertain skies. Alone, a human was fragile. But within a circle of belonging, within a tribe where one would risk their life for another, we endured. That ancient wiring has not disappeared. It still pulses through our veins today. The workplace, the family, the community, they are all echoes of those early tribes. And leadership, at its essence, is about tending to that circle of safety. Simon Sinek paints this circle vividly. When leaders expand it, including more people under its protection, individuals flourish. They feel safe to share ideas, to take risks, to support one another. But when leaders shrink the circle, prioritizing only themselves or a select few, trust collapses. Fear replaces belonging. People become tribal in the worst sense, fighting for scraps, suspicious of each other, and too exhausted to innovate. It is not enough to provide salaries or perks. Humans need more than transactions, they need connection. Consider the difference between a company where employees clock in and out, doing only what is necessary, and one where people feel a deep bond. In the latter, colleagues show up not only for their tasks, but for each other. They stay late because they don't want to let the team down. They endure hardship together because the bond is stronger than the discomfort. This is why so many of us admire stories from the military. It is not the uniform or the rank that inspires us. It is the sight of men and women who would lay down their lives for those beside them. We crave that same bond in civilian life, though too often we don't find it. In the office, in classrooms, in politics, we sometimes find leaders who treat people as expendable, as mere numbers. And in that absence, we feel the hollowness. Simon reminds us that humans release oxytocin when we trust, when we hug, when we know someone is watching out for us. Leaders who foster trust literally shape the brain chemistry of their teams. They create environments where people are healthier, less stressed, and more engaged. But leaders who weaponize fear flood their people with cortisol, leaving them constantly braced for attack. Over time, this breaks bodies, minds, and organizations alike. The problem is not ambition or profit, it is imbalance. When dopamine-driven goals like hitting targets and achieving milestones overshadow the human need for safety and trust, organizations become fragile. They may succeed in the short run, but they collapse when storms come. Great leaders know that success is not about squeezing more from people, it is about protecting the people so they can give their best freely. Simon tells us about a phenomenon in aviation known as crew resource management. For decades, airplane crashes often happened not because of mechanical failures, but because co-pilots were too afraid to speak up to captains. The hierarchy was so rigid, the fear so great, that co-pilots stayed silent even when they saw danger. Once airlines trained leaders to create safety in the cockpit, encourage open voices regardless of rank, crashes decreased dramatically. Lives were saved, not by better technology, but by better leadership. The same applies in every corner of our lives. A team where people feel safe to speak up will spot dangers earlier, innovate more boldly, and stand stronger together. A team where people are silenced by fear will crumble, even if every individual is talented. And here lies a paradox. Leadership is not about the leader. It is about the people. A great leader is like a shield absorbing pressure from outside and protecting those inside. A poor leader reverses this passing pressure inward, leaving their people exposed while they hide behind them. Simon shares the story of Charlie Kim, the CEO of NextJump, a technology company. Kim declared that his company would never fire people for performance reasons. He believed firing was a shortcut way of saying, "We don't care enough to help you grow." Instead, he committed to developing his people relentlessly, no matter their struggles. Imagine the impact of that declaration. Employees felt safe to try, to fail, to improve. The result was not chaos, but loyalty. People worked harder, not because they feared losing their job, but because they knew their job was safe. Contrast that with the typical corporation where layoffs are seen as a tool to meet numbers. Each time jobs are cut for financial targets, trust erodes. Employees no longer believe the company cares for them, so they stop caring for the company. It becomes a vicious cycle. Leaders cut jobs, employees disengage, performance suffers, more cuts follow. Leaders eat first, and the tribe collapses. When Simon speaks of leadership, he does not speak of comfort. He speaks of sacrifice. He speaks of the willingness to eat last, to bear the pain so that others may thrive. And here, he draws from biology again. When leaders act selflessly, serotonin and oxytocin rise, and people feel loyalty. When leaders act selfishly, dopamine dominates short-lived highs with no lasting trust. You can see this difference in society as well. When economic systems prioritize short-term profits over long-term well-being, inequality grows, trust in institutions crumbles, and people retreat into defensive tribes. The circle of safety shrinks. But when leaders at every level, political, corporate, personal, coups to expand safety outward, communities flourish. There is a story Simon often shares about Bob Chapman, CEO of Berry W. Miller, a manufacturing company. In the economic downturn of 2008, his company faced financial strain. Instead of layoffs, Chapman announced a furlough program. Every employee would take a few weeks of unpaid leave, but no one would lose their job. His reasoning was simple. Better we all suffer a little than any of us suffer a lot. The employees, moved by this fairness, began swapping furlough days among themselves. Those who could afford more volunteered extra so others could be spared. Trust deepened, loyalty soared, and when the company recovered, it did so stronger than before. This is the heart of leadership, creating a culture where people are willing to sacrifice not out of fear, but out of love. And that love begins with the leader's choice to sacrifice first. The mantra remains, leaders eat last. Sometimes, to understand leadership, we need to first understand danger. In the animal kingdom, danger is clear: predators lurk, storms rage, food runs scarce. For humans in the modern age, the predators are less visible. They take the form of economic uncertainty, shifting markets, or organizational politics. Yet our brains respond the same way. When we sense danger outside the tribe, we unite. But when we sense danger inside the tribe, when our own leaders become threats, our bodies flood with stress, and we turn against each other. Simon Sinek explains that leadership is about enlarging the circle of safety. Inside this circle, trust reigns. Outside it, dangers exist. Leaders cannot remove external threats, but they can shield their people from unnecessary internal threats. That shield is what gives people the freedom to face the world with courage. But when leaders themselves are the source of fear when they play politics, pit employees against one another, or sacrifice people for numbers, the circle of safety collapses. Then the tribe is lost. Think of a company under pressure. The market is shifting, competitors are rising, and the numbers aren't looking good. In one company, the leader calls their team together and says, "We're in this together. Here's what we face. Here's the plan, and I will protect you as we move forward." In another company, the leader cuts jobs, issues threats, and demands more output. Which team will stand stronger? Which will innovate, fight harder, and stay loyal when the storm passes? The difference is not strategy, it is trust. Simon draws our attention to the way leaders once lived among their people. In ancient tribes, a leader might have had more responsibilities, perhaps a bigger hut, but they were also expected to take the greatest risks. In return for the privileges of leadership, they bore the burden of protecting others. If food was scarce, the leader went hungry last. If danger came, the leader fought first. Leadership was always tied to sacrifice. But in today's world, too often leaders enjoy the privileges without the sacrifice. Big bonuses at the top while employees are laid off. Recognition for leaders while the team goes unseen. This inversion corrodes the very meaning of leadership. Simon calls it a betrayal of the social contract, the ancient unspoken agreement that those who lead must serve. There's a remarkable story about Medal of Honor recipient Captain Mike Drowley, known as Johnny Bravo, a U.S. Air Force pilot. On a mission in Afghanistan, troops were pinned down under heavy fire. Drowley, realizing his team on the ground would not survive, flew his plane directly into enemy fire, again and again, drawing attention away so his people could escape. He risked his life without hesitation because the lives of his people mattered more. That is leadership in its rawest form, the choice to eat last, to put others ahead of self. We see echoes of this outside the battlefield too. Consider Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in prison and emerged without bitterness, ready to unify a divided nation. His leadership was not about revenge or power. It was about expanding the circle of belonging so that enemies became brothers. Mandela ate last, and in doing so, fed the soul of an entire country. But Simon also warns us of the addiction of dopamine, the rush of hitting a quarterly goal, the thrill of personal achievement. The high of recognition feels good, but it fades quickly. Leaders who chase dopamine at the expense of oxytocin and serotonin build organizations on sand. The people under them may comply, but they will never truly commit. When leaders prioritize recognition and protection, serotonin rises. People feel proud. When leaders foster bonds of trust, oxytocin flows. People feel safe. These chemicals create loyalty. They make people stay, even when times are tough. They make people care, not just about tasks, but about each other. Dopamine can win games, but oxytocin and serotonin build teams. This is why layoffs are so destructive, beyond the financial pain. Every time a company cuts jobs to save numbers, the message is clear: you are expendable. And once people believe they are expendable, the trust is gone. They may keep working, but their hearts will not be in it. And without heart, no organization can thrive for long. There's a revealing study Simon mentions. People in stressful jobs with little control over their work were more likely to develop health problems, including heart disease. But those in equally stressful jobs who felt supported by their leaders did not show the same risks. Stress is not the enemy, lack of support is. People can endure incredible hardship when they know they are not alone. It is isolation, the absence of safety, that breaks us. And so the leader's role is not to remove stress, but to give people the strength to face it. It is to say, "I am with you." It is to make sure no one feels they must fight the storm alone. Simon often emphasizes the mantra, leadership is a choice, not a rank. You do not need a title to be a leader. You only need the courage to put others first. In a family, it might be the sibling who steps up when things are tough. In a team, it might be the quiet member who encourages others. Leadership begins wherever someone chooses to care more for others than for themselves. But make no mistake, this choice is costly. True leadership demands sacrifice. It asks us to stay calm when others panic, to take responsibility when things go wrong, to share credit when things go right. It means being willing to eat last, again and again, even when no one notices. Yet this sacrifice is not loss. It is the deepest kind of gain. For when leaders eat last, the people rise. They give more than expected. They protect each other. They create something enduring. And in turn, the leader is not left hungry. They are fed with loyalty, with respect, with the joy of seeing people flourish. At this point, Simon pauses us in the journey with a gentle truth. We all long for this kind of leadership, but many of us have never seen it. We carry wounds from workplaces or communities where leaders ate first, where trust was broken, where fear ruled. It hurts to remember. And yet, this book is not about despair, it is about possibility. It is about the hope that wherever you are, you can choose differently. This is the midpoint where the heart feels heavy, but also ready, because the question rises, what kind of leader will you choose to be? When the world feels uncertain, when pressures mount and dangers loom, the human instinct is to close in, to protect oneself. But leadership asks us to resist that pull. It calls us to do the opposite, to open the circle wider, to extend safety outward, to include more rather than less. And this is where Simon Sinek brings us into the heart of Leaders Eat Last. The very survival of organizations, and indeed societies, depends on the courage of leaders to protect their people. He explains how modern business culture often fails this test. In too many organizations, the obsession with numbers eclipses the care for people. Quarterly reports, stock prices, shareholder demands, these drive decisions that often erode trust. Layoffs become a first resort, not a last. Leaders hide behind spreadsheets while human lives are disrupted. It is a betrayal of leadership's true purpose. The irony is that this approach is unsustainable. Fear may boost short-term results, but it cannot hold. People under constant stress disengage. They stop caring. They leave when given the chance. What remains is a hollow shell of an organization, filled with exhausted workers who give the minimum. The circle of safety collapses, and with it, the future. Contrast this with companies where leaders protect their people. When trust is strong, employees will weather storms together. They will stay even in lean times. They will innovate even under pressure. They will sacrifice for the whole. Bob Chapman's story at Barry Wehmiller comes alive here again. By choosing shared sacrifice over layoffs, Chapman's company didn't just survive, it grew stronger. People did not forget the trust their leaders showed. They repaid it with loyalty and commitment that no financial incentive could have purchased. Simon digs deeper into why trust matters so much. It comes back to our biology. When we feel safe, our bodies release oxytocin and serotonin, building bonds of love and pride. These chemicals make us healthier, happier, and more willing to cooperate. But when fear dominates, cortisol floods us, making us anxious, defensive, and isolated. Leaders who create trust are literally improving the health and resilience of their people. Leaders who create fear are slowly poisoning them. He also draws attention to the concept of abstraction. In small tribes, we naturally care for those we see daily. But as groups grow larger, people become numbers, faceless and distant. Leaders who allow abstraction to dominate lose empathy. They see layoffs as lines on a budget instead of families affected. They see mistakes as statistics instead of human struggles. The challenge of leadership in the modern age is to fight against abstraction, to remember the humanity behind every name, every job, every story. There's a haunting example Simon shares about airline pilots. In one tragic case, a pilot, under extreme stress, failed to listen to his crew, ignoring their warnings until disaster struck. The crew saw the danger but stayed silent too long, fearing the authority of the captain. Leadership in that cockpit was about control, not trust. Lives were lost not because the crew lacked skill, but because the circle of safety was broken. When leaders nurture safety, the opposite happens. Crews speak up. Teams correct mistakes before they spiral. People innovate without fear of ridicule. Simon calls this the power of psychological safety, and it is as essential in the office as it is in the cockpit. At this point, Simon invites us to reflect on our own circles. Who do we protect? Who do we exclude? Do we treat people as human beings or as abstractions? Leadership is not just about guiding big organizations. It is about the choices we make daily to care for those around us, to listen, to protect, to serve. He reminds us of one simple but profound truth. Leadership is not an event. It is a practice. It is built in the everyday actions of showing up, listening, taking responsibility, and choosing sacrifice. It is less about grand speeches and more about quiet consistency. You might wonder, how do I live this? It begins small. You protect someone in a meeting who is spoken over. You take responsibility for a mistake rather than deflecting blame. You give credit where it's due. These are the seeds of trust. Over time, they grow into a culture where people know this is a place where leaders eat last. Simon also makes it clear, leadership requires courage. Courage to say no when shareholders demand cuts that will harm people. Courage to admit mistakes. Courage to step into danger first. Courage to resist the dopamine rush of short-term wins in order to build long-term trust. Without courage, leadership is hollow. With it, leadership can transform entire communities. He paints the picture of leaders who inspire because they put people first. Think of Martin Luther King Jr., who risked his life for the safety and dignity of others. Think of great coaches who nurture their players beyond the game. These leaders remind us that true influence does not come from authority. It comes from trust earned through sacrifice. And so the mantra echoes again. Leaders eat last. Leaders eat last. But Simon also offers a warning. Leadership can be lost. A leader who fails to protect, who succumbs to selfishness, shrinks the circle. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. This is why leadership requires vigilance. It is not something you win once and keep forever. It is a choice you must renew every day. At this stage in the journey, Simon's message touches something deep. We see both the promise and the peril. We see the damage when leaders eat first, and the beauty when they eat last. And we feel the weight of choice. Because leadership is not distant. It is not just about generals or CEOs. It is about you. It is about me. It is about us, in the daily decisions we make, in the way we treat people when no one is watching. And so, the question rises once more. What will you choose? Simon Sinek brings us closer to the beating heart of leadership by reminding us that the greatest organizations and the most enduring communities are built not on fear, but on trust. Trust is not a policy. It is not something written into a handbook. It is a living, breathing presence, grown through consistent choices and sacrifices that signal, you are safe here. Consider again the biology. Dopamine can push us forward, but it is selfish. It is about the goal, the hit, the win. Oxytocin, however, is about us. It is about the connection we feel when we sacrifice for others, when we share trust, when we hold each other through difficulty. Leaders who depend only on dopamine create competition within their organizations, individuals chasing bonuses, stepping on one another to climb higher. But leaders who nurture oxytocin create collaboration. They create teams where success is collective, where people feel joy not just for their own wins, but for each other's. Simon tells us the story of the 1982 Tylenol crisis. When poisoned capsules killed several people, Johnson & Johnson faces disaster. The company could have denied responsibility or tried to minimize losses. Instead, they made the extraordinary decision to pull 31 million bottles of Tylenol off the shelves at a massive cost. Why? Because they valued people over profits. They placed the safety of customers above shareholder pressure. And in time, that trust was repaid. The brand recovered, even stronger. Johnson & Johnson chose to eat last. On the other hand, there are countless examples where companies chose money first. Think of financial institutions in the 2008 crisis, where leaders protected their own bonuses while millions lost homes, jobs, and savings. The betrayal was not just financial, it was moral. When leaders protect only themselves, the social contract breaks, and society itself begins to fray. Simon expands this idea into the role of government and institutions. Leaders at the highest levels also carry the responsibility of eating last. When politicians prioritize their own re-election over the people they serve, the circle of safety shrinks. When leaders hoard privilege and pass the burdens to the vulnerable, trust in institutions erodes. And without trust, societies weaken. But when leaders put citizens first, remarkable resilience emerges. Simon recalls how, during World War II, leaders asked ordinary people to ration food, conserve fuel, and endure hardship not for personal gain, but for the survival of all. People complied not because of fear, but because they believed in the shared cause. The suffering was collective, and so was the strength. This is what happens when leaders expand the circle. Simon also touches on the invisible cost of poor leadership. When workers go home from toxic workplaces, the stress does not stay at the office. It spills into families. Parents snap at children. Partners grow distant. Health declines. But when leaders create safe workplaces, the opposite happens. People carry home patience, joy, and love. Leadership, then, is not just about an organization's success, it ripples outward into society, shaping the health of families and communities. This ripple effect is why leadership is so sacred. It is not limited to those in corner offices. It is anyone who has influence over others' lives. A teacher can be a leader, shaping the trust of a classroom. A nurse can be a leader, protecting the dignity of patients. A parent can be a leader, eating last so their children grow strong. Simon makes an important point. Leadership is not about being in charge. It is about taking care of those in your charge. It is about the choice to shoulder the burden so others may thrive. And this is not just altruism, it is wisdom. Because when people feel cared for, they give their best. When they know their leaders have their backs, they unleash energy, creativity, and loyalty that no paycheck alone can buy. There is a beautiful symmetry here. When leaders sacrifice, followers respond with commitment. When leaders hoard, followers withdraw. It is a cycle, and leaders set it in motion. Halfway through his message, Simon asks us to pause, because this is not just about them. It is about you. You may have been hurt by poor leadership. You may carry scars from places where you were not valued, where you were made expendable, where trust was broken. Those wounds are real. They may still ache, but they do not define what is possible. The hope of Leaders Eat Last is that, even in a world full of broken leadership, you can choose differently. You can be the one who protects rather than exploits. You can be the one who expands the circle. And perhaps you wonder, will it be worth it? To sacrifice, to risk, to eat last, what will I gain? The answer is not instant, like a dopamine hit. It is slower, deeper. You gain loyalty. You gain meaning. You gain the quiet strength of knowing that people stand with you, not because they must, but because they want to. And in the end, this is the only kind of leadership that endures. Remember this mantra, as Simon repeats, leaders eat last. Simon Sinek reminds us that when leaders get it right, the effect feels almost magical, but it isn't magic at all. It's the natural unfolding of what humans were always meant for: cooperation, trust, and shared survival. The best leaders create conditions where people don't just survive at work, they thrive. Where Monday mornings don't feel like a battlefield, but like a gathering of allies. One of the most profound insights Simon offers is that leadership cannot be measured by rank, wealth, or power. Leadership is measured by the willingness to sacrifice. Titles may grant authority, but only sacrifice earns loyalty. Think of a shepherd. The sheep may obey because of the crook in his hand, but they trust because he fends off wolves. Leadership is the same. Protection is what earns true devotion. This is why so many of us feel drawn to stories of soldiers, firefighters, or medics who risk everything for others. They remind us of what leadership looks like in its rawest form: unvarnished, selfless, deeply human. And even if we will never fight on a battlefield, we long for that same sense of safety in our workplaces, in our schools, in our families. Simon shares how destructive it becomes when leaders forget this. When bonuses are prioritized over jobs, when shareholders are placed above employees, when numbers are celebrated more than human lives, organizations unravel. Fear replaces trust. People begin to look out only for themselves, cutting corners, hoarding resources, even sabotaging colleagues. The tribe fractures from within. But when leaders eat last, a different story unfolds. People lean in. They innovate, not out of fear, but out of pride and love. They work longer hours, not because they're forced, but because they believe in the cause. They stand shoulder to shoulder even when times are hard. This is the paradox. By putting others first, leaders gain far more than if they had sought to protect only themselves. Simon emphasizes that real leadership is deeply personal. It is not a system, but a relationship. Leaders must know their people, care about their struggles, celebrate their wins. He tells the story of Captain William Swenson, again the soldier who kissed a wounded comrade on the forehead before returning to battle. That kiss, small as it was, symbolized everything. I am here with you. You are not alone. You are worth everything. Leadership is lived in gestures like that, not in grand speeches, but in the daily choice to show love and sacrifice. He also invites us to see how this plays out beyond organizations. Societies flourish when leaders expand the circle of safety to include more people, not fewer. History shows us the danger when leaders shrink that circle, when they exclude, divide, or scapegoat. Fear spreads. Violence follows. But when leaders unify, when they call people into shared belonging, societies become resilient. They face external threats with courage because they trust each other inside the circle. One of the key lessons here is that leadership is not efficient. Caring for people takes time, patience, and resources. Training someone rather than firing them is costly in the short term. Listening rather than demanding takes longer. But the long-term reward is immeasurable. Efficiency may win quick battles, but trust wins wars. And this truth is not limited to boardrooms or governments. It touches your life too. Leadership may mean being the friend who listens without judgment. It may mean being the parent who eats last so their child feels safe and full. It may mean being the colleague who takes blame instead of deflecting it. These small acts, repeated over time, create ripples. They expand the circle of safety in ways we may never fully see. Simon challenges us. Will you chase the quick high of dopamine, the temporary thrill of personal wins? Or will you choose the deeper path of oxytocin and serotonin, the path of trust, loyalty, and love? The first path is tempting but fragile. The second is demanding but unbreakable. You, listening now, may already know the answer. You may already feel the pull of a different way, because deep down, we all long for leaders who eat last. And deep down, we all want to be that kind of leader. Simon Sinek does not let us escape the truth that leadership is not a theory, it is lived in action, in choices, in sacrifices that others can feel. And in those choices, lives are shaped. He shows us that when leaders build trust, the impact is not just organizational, it is deeply human. Work becomes more than a paycheck. It becomes a place where people feel valued, connected, and safe. And when work nourishes us, it pours into every other part of life. Families benefit, communities strengthen, societies stabilize. But when leadership fails, when leaders eat first, the opposite spreads like a sickness. People drag stress home, snapping at their children, numbing with distractions, growing resentful and exhausted. Broken trust at work creates ripples that wound far beyond office walls. The cost of poor leadership is not just profit, it is human well-being. Simon draws a clear picture of how this happens in the modern world. We live in a system driven by finite metrics, quarterly earnings, immediate performance reviews, short-term results. But humans are not built for this kind of pressure. Our biology is wired for long-term belonging, for relationships that last, for tribes that endure. When systems value only the immediate, they clash with our nature. And in that clash, people suffer. This is why great leaders look beyond the quarter, beyond the numbers, beyond the short-term wins. They think in terms of decades, of generations. They plant trees knowing they may never sit in the shade. They understand that leadership is not about extracting value, it is about cultivating it. Take again the example of Bob Chapman at Barry Miller. By refusing to lay off employees, even in hard times, Chapman sent a message. You belong here. That message didn't just improve morale, it built unshakable loyalty. Employees worked harder, not because they feared losing their jobs, but because they believed their leader cared. Imagine the power of that kind of trust spreading across industries, across societies. Simon also introduces us to the dangers of abstraction in leadership. As organizations grow larger, it becomes easy to see people as numbers, as headcount, as resources. Leaders stop knowing the names and faces behind decisions. And when people are abstracted, empathy fades. It becomes easier to fire, easier to sacrifice, easier to betray. True leadership demands fighting against that abstraction, taking the time to know people, to see them as human beings, to remember that every decision affects lives. This is why leaders must be present. Leadership is not in the memo or the quarterly report, it is in walking the floor, shaking hands, listening to stories. It is in noticing when someone is struggling, in celebrating when someone succeeds. Leadership is a human act, not a mechanical one. Simon ties this back to biology once again. When we feel unseen, cortisol rises, stress accumulates, we retreat. But when we feel noticed, oxytocin flows, trust builds. We lean in. Leaders hold the power to regulate the chemistry of their organizations through the smallest gestures. A thank you, a conversation, a willingness to listen. The truth becomes clear. Leadership is not complicated, but it is rare. Because it requires courage, it requires sacrifice, it requires putting aside ego and hunger for personal glory. And yet, for those who dare, the reward is profound. A team that trusts will give more than you could ever command. They will stay through storms, they will protect one another, they will rise together. Simon reminds us that the leaders we remember most in history are not those who took the most for themselves, but those who gave the most away. Mother Teresa, who lived in poverty to serve the poorest. Gandhi, who fasted and suffered alongside his people. Leaders who ate last, not once, but as a way of life. At this point, Simon gently invites reflection. What would it look like if you chose to lead this way? Not someday, but now. What if you chose to listen first, to protect others before yourself, to make sacrifices that build trust? In your family, in your team, in your friendships. The place does not matter, the principle does. Simon Sinek brings us toward the closing arc of his message with a sobering recognition. Leadership is not about perfection, nor about always knowing the answer. It is about responsibility. The best leaders stumble, make mistakes, even fail, but they never abandon their people. They admit when they are wrong. They stay when things are hard. They protect, even when it costs them dearly. He tells us that trust is built not in grand gestures, but in daily consistency. The small things matter. Listening when someone speaks, admitting a mistake instead of blaming, showing gratitude without being asked. These moments, accumulated over time, create an environment where people feel they can breathe, where they know they belong. Leadership is lived in the thousand small acts that say, I will put you first. Simon also emphasizes that leadership is not innate, it is learned. We are not born knowing how to sacrifice for others, but we can practice it. We can build the habit of generosity, the courage of responsibility, the patience of service. Just as muscles grow with exercise, leadership grows with use. Every time a leader chooses to eat last, they strengthen the fabric of trust. He warns, too, of the cost of neglect. When leaders fail to build trust, when they choose selfishness, the damage accumulates invisibly until one day it erupts. Scandals, collapses, broken cultures, these do not happen overnight. They are the harvest of years of neglect. Leadership requires vigilance, because trust, once lost, takes lifetimes to rebuild. And yet, Simon does not leave us in fear. He reminds us that leadership is one of the most deeply rewarding paths we can walk. To serve others, to see them flourish, to know that you made space for someone to grow, that is a joy deeper than any paycheck, deeper than any title. The paradox of leadership is that in eating last, you are fed with something richer than food: meaning. Here is where Simon turns to you. You, listening right now, may not think of yourself as a leader, but if even one person looks to you for guidance, you are. If even one person depends on your example, you are. Leadership is not about armies or boardrooms, it is about people. And there are always people who need your courage. Imagine this: a small seed buried in the dark soil. It waits, quietly, until warmth and water arrive. Then, slowly, it pushes upward, breaking the earth, reaching for the light. Leadership is like that seed. It begins small, often unnoticed, but with patience and sacrifice, it grows into something that shelters others, something that bears fruit for generations. Simon invites us to plant those seeds today, to create circles of safety in our homes, our workplaces, our communities, to choose trust over fear, service over self, love over ego, to be the one who eats last again and again, until it becomes the way of life. As this journey closes, let this mantra take root in your heart. Leaders eat last. Leaders eat last. So here is your quiet invitation, your heartfelt challenge. Tomorrow, in some small way, choose to eat last. Protect someone else. Sacrifice a little comfort to give another safety. You may not see the ripple right away, but it will come. Like sunlight breaking the horizon, like a seed sprouting in silence, your choice will grow into something larger than you can imagine. And if this message has stirred something within you, if you have felt the longing for better leadership, if you have seen yourself in these stories, then I ask you to carry it forward. Share it with someone you love. Let them know they matter. And if you wish to continue this journey with me, I invite you warmly. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. Tell me how this touched you. Tell me what you will choose, because the world needs more leaders who eat last. And maybe, just maybe, that leader is you.